At my peak, I was the 816th best player in Europe, which was not particularly impressive given that I tried my absolute heart out and played for hours every single day. Over the years, people have rightfully dropped comments on my videos, claiming that I should just follow my own advice to become a professional player. This video right here is going to be my most important video ever for aspiring pro players. Over the years, I've understood many reasons behind why I didn't make it, and the sad thing is that I see thousands of ambitious players who are really passionate about the game, just like me, who are sadly never even going to get a chance to go pro because of their practice methods. If I could speak to myself when I just got into competitive Fortnite, this video are the exact things I would have said, and as a result, I wouldn't have ended up peaking as the 816th best player, but rather qualifying for tournaments quite consistently and being way higher on the power rankings leaderboards. The first major mistake I made was thinking that winning was good for improvement. I've always been someone who's loved playing creative, but I've never been good at looking for opponents that beat me long term. I'm talking hopping on every day and trying to find someone who consistently beats you and grind against them. Looking back, I've actually always been super lucky, since that person has always been nearby. At the beginning of chapter 2, I had this great friend, a guy named Skillico, that I played against, who beat me way more often than I beat him. And instead of playing as much as possible against him, I told him he played in such a cringe way that I didn't want to play him. This held back my skill improvement enormously, since it was obvious he was a better fighter than me and could punish my mistakes to a way higher extent than most. I've also throughout the years had the opportunity to play a lot against players like iDrop, but not done it because it's so insanely annoying to lose like 5-1. In other terms, in the moments of playing, having fun was the most important to me. But looking back, I wish I had done the things that made me the best player I could have been. And that would have been to become someone who's totally okay with losing. Because if you lose a lot when practicing, you'll naturally learn and develop much faster compared to someone who wins everything every single day. Moving on, I've always tried to optimize my PC as much as possible. It seriously makes being a consistent player so much easier when your FPS is high and input delay as low as possible. The awesome thing is that getting high and stable FPS is easier than ever with the program Hone. To download Hone, you can simply go to the Epic Games Store and download it completely for free. When it's downloaded, finish the installation process, and you'll have to sign in or make an account. When the program opens up, you'll see a long list of optimizations. They also have detailed descriptions under each and every one, so you know exactly what you're doing when turning one on. For example, here you can see they have an option to turn on gaming optimizations. And slightly higher up, they have a setting called Disable Windows Power Throttling. That is a setting that is absolutely crucial to have disabled if you're playing on a laptop. In addition to this, they have game-specific tweaks. So if I head to the left-hand side here and go down to Games and click on Fortnite, I can activate Hone Performance, which will optimize my PC for playing the game. If any one of the tweaks don't feel worth it for you, then you're just one click away from disabling them. When I use Hone, my FPS not only increases by a lot, but the performance is also more consistent, which makes playing tournaments, customs, and of course creative a lot easier. And the beauty of it all is that it's free to use, but with a slight caveat of only 10 optimizations. With Premium, you actually get unlimited optimizations and no ads. Hone has been a long-time partner of this channel, and I seriously love their software. Check it out in the description below, on the Epic Games launcher, or the pinned comment. Moving on, another reason behind why I didn't make it, and a massive mistake I made, was not getting a coach with a proven track record. Now, this may sound weird given that I make educational videos, but getting a coach would have made me at least twice the player I ever became. The job of good coaches is to make super solid off-spawn loot paths, off-spawn fighting strats, drop maps, letting you know what your weaknesses are when valuing, and much more. Having someone to work with on strategies like these makes competing at a high level 10 times easier. And given that I've invested over 10,000 hours into this game, it's honestly embarrassing that I did it without a coach. I've always talked about how unfair advantages is the way to go if you want to do something extraordinary. And a coach is one of the biggest unfair advantages one can have when it comes to competing in Fortnite. In solos especially, having a coach will easily improve your results drastically, since you'll be two working on strats to help you do as good as possible, whereas 99% of others are doing everything alone. I think it was an ego thing, like I saw a lot of other players succeed in tournaments without a coach, and I wanted to do that too. But in reality, I've learned that it literally does not matter at all control how you perform, as long as you're obviously not cheating or following any other immoral way of playing. Looking back, it's almost like disrespectful to myself that I didn't get a coach and give myself the best odds of doing as good as I possibly could, because I put in a lot of effort into grinding, and although I was super passionate about it and loved it, I should have just put my ego aside and worked with a coach from day one. Another guy to look at how you're playing, your strengths, weaknesses, and helping you with strats is never a bad idea. The third insanely huge mistake I made was playing the same things every single day, and just believing that as long as I played long hours every day, I would eventually become a really good player. When I started playing Fortnite, I had this huge sense of improvement every day I played. I felt that the things I was playing made me better. Better mechanics, better aim, and better game sense all developed quickly. But as time went on, I lost that feeling or sense of improvement completely. I hopped on the game and played the exact same way I had done for months, without any real sense of improvement. The feeling I had was that it was fun, and maybe a super small feeling of mechanical improvement every day. But I knew that I was lacking in solo endgame strategies, off-spawn strats, loot paths, farm paths, experience in stacked lobbies against good players, and much more. But even though I low-key knew that these were all massive shortcomings I undoubtedly had as a player, I didn't ever make a plan around fixing those shortcomings. So what I would have loved to say to myself when I grinded the most would have been that you need to write down your shortcomings. Rank them from easiest to hardest to fix. Start today with fixing your most fixable shortcoming. And a lot of people think this takes like a day or two, but even the smallest one probably takes around 2 weeks of daily grinding to fix to a good enough standard. Your biggest one will take 6 months minimum if you do everything correctly. I actually started grinding a ton of tokens after not having felt any sense of improvement for years. But when I started grinding these tokens, I noticed that most of the players I was fighting were much better than me. And I remember after the first full day of grinding tokens, even though I lost like 8 out of 10 rounds, I still felt really happy because I had this genuine, true sense of improvement that I hadn't felt in years. And that feeling was so amazing, and I truthfully thought I just couldn't feel it anymore because of how long it was since I last felt it. Over a few weeks, the skill gap between me and these tokens players became noticeably smaller, but they were still no doubt much better fighters. And even after like 2 months of daily playing tokens, I still was worse than the majority of players I played against. But instead of losing 8 out of 10, I lost 6 out of 10. So you need to understand that fixing big shortcomings, like going from being a top 2000 fighter in Europe, like I probably was, to becoming a top, say, 250 fighter, takes, like I said, minimum 6 months if you do everything right. And this may sound demotivating because 6 months sounds like a long time. And you may think you can outwork that because you're talented or whatever, and maybe that's true. But in 6 months, you'll look back and think, wow, that went really fast. And you can either keep the same terrible daily routine that feels natural and fun to you, but yields no improvement, or you can go looking for that sense of improvement yet again. Because what I've learned is that when you're truly improving, you'll 1,000,000% feel it. So if you don't feel any sense of improvement, or very little, you are, without a doubt, practicing in an extraordinarily bad way. For me, feeling the sense of improvement came from grinding tokens every hour I was on the game, around 4 hours a day. And even after 2 months, I still felt an enormous feeling of improvement. For you, this feeling of improving fast may come from playing ranked, VOD reviewing your tournaments, watching how-to videos on YouTube, playing your IRL and creative who's a bit better than you, getting a coach to help you get a new perspective on the game, or playing customs. This all depends on your current skill level. If the things you're playing are way too hard, you'll not get the feeling of improvement. And the same goes if they're way too easy. The goal must be to find something to grind that is hard for you to play and requires you to be fully focused. And something where you can win and succeed if you do everything right. But if you do something wrong, you get punished. If you find that and grind it long term, you'll become an incredible player. Because if you don't feel the sense of improvement, you can play this game for over 10,000 hours and not even become a top 1000 player. The hours you put in don't matter even close to as much as what you do with those hours. Another reason behind why I failed bizarrely at going pro is because I never played customs against players within the top 1000 in my region. In Europe, you have these Discord servers where you can play no zone rule customs. First, we have Noble Division 3, which is a Discord open to anyone. So even someone who has never played a tournament before can play here. Then you have Noble Division 2, which is a practice Discord for players within the top 2,500 on the Fortnite Tracker Power Rankings leaderboards. And lastly, you have the server you absolutely need to get into if you want to go pro in Europe, called Noble 24/7. This Discord server is for players that are within the top 1000 of the 2025 Fortnite Tracker PR leaderboards. In NA, this system is called Vital Scrims, so you need to look into that if you want to go pro in NA. I personally played a ton of Noble Division 3 and Noble Division 2 and did fairly well in the sessions I played. Sessions are usually 3 games, by the way, and the cool thing about these sessions is that there are leaderboards at the end, so you can see how you did against the others. But here's the problem. You simply can't go pro from just grinding Noble Div 3 and Noble Div 2. It's quite literally, no joke at all, impossible. Because the skill difference between players in these discords and Noble 24/7, where the top 1000 players in Europe play, is enormous. Like, grinding Noble Div 3 and Div 2 like I did is honestly a total waste of time, compared to doing something like grinding tokens and playing 2 to 3 sessions a week. Because your goal if you want to go pro needs to be to become a top 1000 player as fast as humanly possible, so that you can start playing in Noble 24/7 as your tournament practice. Now, this sounds crazy. A lot of people grind Noble Div 2 and get somewhat good tournament results. But in my opinion, and looking back, I would have been unbelievably much better off just grinding as hard as I could in tokens, or working hard to get a friend group with players who would have been open to play 24/7 with me, even when I wasn't within the top 1000 on the Fortnite Tracker PR leaderboards. You see, when you grind Noble Div 3 and Div 2, you very often don't get punished for your mistakes. If you do bad rotates in endgames or waste a ton of mats, some low-level player will often make the worst play you've ever seen, and you'll get a refresh and win the game. And this makes you think that you're good. But in reality, you got lucky because the level in your lobby was low. And this is something that simply will extremely rarely, if ever, happen in high-tier lobbies. And since this is happening, you won't realize your major mistakes of making bad rotates or wasting way too many materials. In addition, every other aspect of a game, like the early and mid game in Div 3 and 2, is quite easy to the point where you don't have to focus super hard on Storm Surge, positioning, or fast rotates to make it to the end game. Whereas in Noble 24/7, you need to be locked in to get your Surge. I actually found it ridiculously hard to play Surge the handful of times I played 24/7. It's like 10 times harder than in Div 3 and 2. You needed to be fast to get good positions, and your rotates had to actually be good and smart. And if they're not, you'll get punished and instantly learn from what you did wrong. I know I'm spending a lot of time talking about this stuff, but seriously guys, please, if you want to go pro in Fortnite, you must understand that you're completely wasting your time if you're not in a practice Discord with the top 1000 players in either EU or NA. I'm not saying this as some kind of generic typical advice. This right here is so important to the point where if I could only say one thing to all of you aspiring pro players watching, it would have, without a shadow of a doubt, been that you need to get into Noble 24/7 or the NA equivalent as fast as humanly possible. You should literally be stressed every day you're not in there if you truly want to go pro, because you won't make it unless you get in. Now, this sounds harsh and maybe it's very demotivating to those of you who are top 5000 on the PR leaderboards, but someone has to say it. And if somebody had just made this exact thing crystal clear to me, that going pro is impossible unless you get into this practice Discord, I would have ended up minimum twice as good as I ever became, and probably much better than that as well, and I would have ended as someone with way more earnings too. The fifth major flaw I had when grinding super hard was that I was playing way too fast. And I focused on the wrong things in both my fights and endgames. When practicing, I focused on having fast and consistent mechanics, instead of always, 100% of the time, being aware of where my opponent was in a fight. Being able to do mechanical moves consistently and at a relatively high speed, whilst exclusively looking at the opponent, is a must if you want to make it. In a lot of fights, especially against good players, I did mechanical moves that had me watching the edit menu for a short second, or sometimes I had to look at my builds to ensure I didn't mess up. Splitting my focus on the edit menu, builds, and looking at my opponent made me a much more inconsistent fighter than I could have been if I just always practiced with the intention of maintaining 1000% awareness over my opponent at all times during the fights I was in. You see, even if you lose track of the opponent for 1 second, you can miss out on an opportunity to punish them and deal a good chunk of damage. You want to be a player who punishes every single mistake the opponent makes. This is completely necessary if you want to compete at the top. To add on to that, when practicing, you always want to make fights as easy as possible. solo. For some reason, I wanted my fights to look fancy. I think that was because I'm a content creator, but it really doesn't matter how you eliminate an opponent. And the easier and quicker you make it, the better. Because if you play in a way where it's hard to replicate the same moves you're doing in fights consistently, you'll be an inconsistent fighter. Today, it's all about getting an advantage in a fight and trying to get in the opponent's box as soon as possible if you have the opportunity, especially when playing against good players. Now, something else I also learned way too late is that one simple strategy you follow can change everything. I remember in solos, I didn't have a plan at all when I played endgames in tournaments. I just went around and fought everybody and spent a ton of mats in the process. And when these games went well, they went really well. But when it came to winning games in solo victory cash cups, for example, it was an embarrassingly terrible strategy. I remember in chapter 6, season 2, the bad season, I think it was Bloodex, Fruzzy, or Eyedrop or something, one of my good friends, who just told me to wait until a moving zone was on me before rotating, and then taking out the bat and rotating to the front side and just building one simple box in hard mats. And this strat sounds super obvious, but just having that little strategy to follow time and time again made me so much more consistent in solos. And it made me go from placing like top 5k to easily placing within the top 1000. The thing I didn't understand about competitive Fortnite was that in early, mid, and end games, it is possible to have set strategies you follow every single game. Every game is obviously different, but having some standard rules for what to do makes placing highly much easier. For example, the solo endgame strat I just talked about, rotating out of your drop spot at a certain time to ensure that you rotate before anyone else, or claiming a certain hill in the mid game when the zone pulls a certain way. I've always been really bad at making good strategies like these. I wish I could give you some really beneficial ones, but if you play tournaments right now and you just play off of your intuition, you should really change that. Make some rules for yourself, preferably based off what your weaknesses have been the last 10 or so tournaments you've played. Next up, I gotta touch on playing to win and not to lose. It's something I've always been extremely bad at. Let me explain. Let's say you need a 10 kill win to qualify to a solo victory cash cup finals. And when you load into the game, maybe you get 1 or 2 kills off spawn, and deep down you know that you need like 7 or 8 kills before the endgame to give yourself the best odds of actually doing it. For me, I've often just been happy with like 3 or 4 kills and praying for a miracle in the endgame. And needless to say, looking back, this was always an embarrassingly bad strategy. I would have been way better off just full sending 7 or 8 kills before the endgame. Even if I died with like 5 or 6 kills, that would have boosted my confidence for the next time I had the same opportunity. Because if I could get 5 or 6, then of course I could get 7 or 8 if I just played a tiny bit better. The sad truth is that playing like I did, not to lose instead of playing to win, was a strategy that would have never ever allowed me to consistently place highly. A pro player in this exact scenario would play the game and key until he had as many kills as he thought he needed before the endgame, even if that was 15 kills. Pro players that don't care about getting a good placement. They care about qualifying and making money. And if you want to make it, that needs to be your mindset too. The same applies for tourneys where you have bad loot in your last game. I remember I used to try to squeeze out as good a placement as I possibly could in these games. Again, praying for a miracle to win it, instead of taking a fight as soon as I understood that my loot was not good enough to comfortably win it. The mentality I wish I had was a all or nothing mentality. I don't care if I place top 1158 or top 9999. I want to comfortably get into that top 1k so I can qualify to the solo victory cash cup finals. This next reason behind why I failed at becoming truly good may sound very boring, but please hear me out, because it's exceptionally important to understand this if you want to become one of the best. I VOD reviewed completely wrong, and even that is an understatement. I remember watching over solo cash cup games and being like, oh yeah, I missed that edit, I need to practice that. And I failed those builds, let's hop into creative and never fail those again. Like, that is not the way to VOD review to actually become good. A way better way to go about VOD reviewing is looking at things like how effectively are you looting at your drop spot? Are you effectively farming? Do you get cap mats faster than the others in your lobby? Do you do good rotates? And do you waste mats unnecessarily in endgames? It's not about missing a build or edit, even though you of course can't do that often either if you want to play at a high level. In addition, you can learn so much from trying to find out what kind of strategies pro players follow. Like some pro players back in the day had a strat where they would get to frontside in second moving as quickly as possible and start looking for height. Like that right there is an amazingly easy strategy. But even though it's simple, it's still a great one, because one mistake from the high team would get punished instantly. What I also wish I did way more is just pausing replays or YouTube videos and asking what would I do in this exact situation when watching Peterbot, Vico, Flixie, or whoever. By doing this, you'll learn so much. This game is seriously all about how smart you are and the decisions you make. Sure, you also need to have somewhat good mechanics and solid aim to succeed too, but there are thousands thousands of players with insane mechanics and great aim who never succeed, but basically 0 players who have insane game sense and game IQ who don't succeed. Almost every single Fortnite player spend all their time mastering builds and edits, but almost no one spends time on truly understanding the game. But by doing that, you'll actually become someone who's better than almost everyone else. I've always said this, but never really taken action to do it myself. If you want a truly unique result, you need to practice in a unique manner too.